city of Babylon and about ancient Egypt. As early towns grew, they had to develop new systems of government, new means to store and distribute foods, and new ways to protect themselves. The strongest settlements expanded their territory by conquering their neighbors and thus creating the first empires. One of the most powerful early empires belong to the Babylonians. In the 18th century BCE, they conquered a large area in what is now the Middle East. But were then defeated by their rivals, the Hittites. They rose to power again in the 6th century BCE, and the capital city, Babylon, became one of the richest and most magnificent in the ancient world. Here we can see picture or illustration of the city of Babylon. This great city sat at the heart of the Babylonian Empire. The huge buildings were constructed around year 580 BCE by King Nebuchadnezzar II, who wanted his capital to be the most magnificent city in the region. Let me show you a couple of details. Here we can see a public space. And the processional way that ran through the city, lined with blue patterned tiles. It was used for public gatherings and religious rituals. Here we can see tiled wall patterns. And this gate called Ishtar Gate, and this gate marked the ceremonial entrance to Babylon. It was used for religious processions as well as for normal traffic like this. Here we can see some of the private houses. These ordinary houses were built of mud bricks. And they are thought to have had no windows to keep out the desert heat. This building is a temple. The Etemenanki Zikkurat. This temple was dedicated to Marduk, the patron god of the city. Here we can see a royal palace. This lavish royal palace was a symbol of the king's power. Around the city there were city walls, because wealthy cities were targets for raiding nomads and enemy armies. And Babylon was defended by strong walls of mud brick. Very famous were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. They were one of the 7 wonders of the world. Nobody knows for sure where they stood, but the foundations of terraced gardens were found in Babylon in the early 20th century. And here we can see a river, Euphrates. Early cities like Babylon depended on water supplies for drinking and fertile soils for farming. The Euphrates provided both, as well as a vital trade route for boats. For more than 3,000 years, Egypt was home to one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. They left behind many clues about their way of life, from religious texts to huge, mysterious pyramids. The ancient Egyptians were ruled by a king called pharaohs. Who were thought to be the children of the gods. Egypt's complex society had strict layers, from priests, governors, and mayors to soldiers and peasants. And they developed a detailed system of writing to keep records of wealth and ownership. Egyptian life was full of ritual. They worshipped hundreds of gods and goddesses, and the pharaohs and priests performed complex rituals to ensure good crops, keep away disease, and bring success in war. They also built massive tombs for their dead, and many of them were stuffed with gold and treasure. Ancient Egyptian writing used pictures called hieroglyphics. Each symbol could represent a sound, a word, or an action. Instead of paper, the Egyptians used flattened sheets of a type of reed called papyrus. Inscriptions could also be pressed into clay, painted on pottery, or carved in stone. Writing was seen as a gift from thought, the god of wisdom, and only priests and specially trained scribes were taught how to read and write. The names of important figures, such as kings and queens, were written inside an oval, like this one. called a cartouche as a symbol of eternal life. Here we can see a map of ancient Egypt. This part is Lower Egypt and this part is Upper Egypt. Ancient Egypt was seen as two kingdoms united under the pharaohs. The lower kingdom was the lands around the mouth of the Nile. The farmlands along the Nile banks further upstream were the Upper Kingdom. They were unified in around 3000 years BCE. Ancient Egypt went through the three periods of strength: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. In between, wars and disasters such as crop failures left the country weakened. In this area we have the Great Pyramid. This huge stone pyramid was built by the pharaoh Khufu of the Old Kingdom. Three burial chambers are hidden inside, and it was finished around 2560 years BCE. In this eastern district we also have the Sphinx. This huge statue has the body of a lion and the head of a human. It was probably built around 2550 years BCE. In this area is the Valley of the Kings. In the time of the New Kingdom, kings were often buried underground instead of in pyramids. And this valley houses many of their tombs. And here we have Abu Simbel, temples that were built by King Ramesses II in about 1260 years BCE. statues of the pharaoh and his queen guards the entrance of Abu Simbel. The Egyptians believed that the soul of a dead person undertook a perilous journey to another world. After death, the soul wandered the underworld until it could be judged by the gods. The god Anubis would weigh their hearts to measure their worth. Good people were rewarded with a happy afterlife, but bad people were devoured by Ammit, a fearsome beast with the head of a crocodile, the chest of a lion, and the torso of hippopotamus. Here we can see scales of judgment. The dead person's heart sits on the left side of the scale, and on the other side is the feather of truth. An evil person's heart will be heavier than the feather. And this jackal-headed god, Anubis, makes sure the scales are even. This is God of wisdom, thought, the God that records the judgment. Egypt is surrounded by desert, so the ancient kingdom depended entirely on the river Nile. Every year, the river flooded, submerging the farmland along its banks. The floods washed rich soil down from the highlands to the south. The Egyptians built ditches and low walls to trap the mud and water in fields along each side of the river, giving them fertile soil in which they can grow crops such as wheat, grapes, vegetables. The whole kingdom of Egypt depended on the floods. And in a dry year, many people would starve. Here we can see this circle of life. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter. growing season, harvest season, flood season, and planting season. The Egyptians worshipped a large number of gods, often in the form of animals and natural forces. The greatest god was Ra, the sun god, who created the universe. Cow-headed Hathor was goddess of motherhood. The god of wisdom, Thoth, with the ibis head. While Sobek, god of the Nile, was shown as a crocodile. The goddess Nut arched her body over the earth to form the sky. This is the picture of God Ra that journeys across the sky as the sun. The disk on his head produces light, and he stands on a boat that sails across the sky from morning until night. Ancient Egypt was ruled by the pharaohs, powerful kings who were worshipped as gods. They are most famous today for their great pyramids and temples, and the priceless treasures found in their tombs. An Egyptian pharaoh wielded enormous power. He could write laws, set taxes, lead the army into battle, and judge legal cases. However, he also had many responsibilities. He was taught to control the flooding of the river Nile, which was essential for growing the kingdom's food. If disaster or famine struck, the pharaoh had to beg the gods for assistance, and might be blamed by the people if the situation did not improve. After death, pharaohs and other important figures were mummified to preserve their bodies in the afterlife. Some of the earliest kings of Egypt were laid to rest in huge pyramids, while later kings were buried in underground tombs. Here we can see illustration of the Tutankhamun tomb. Tutankhamun became pharaoh at the age of 9, and he died suddenly just 9 years later in 1327 BCE. He was buried in an underground tomb in the Valley of the Kings on the west bank of the River Nile. Although grave robbers stole some of his burial treasure, thousands of precious artifacts lay undisturbed for more than 3,000 years before they were rediscovered in the tomb in 1922. 10 years took to record all the treasures in his tomb, and almost 300 pounds of pure gold, or 110 kilograms, was used to make Tutankhamun inner coffin. Let us see what we have on this illustration. Here it is entrance hall, a short entrance corridor sloped downward into the tomb. Here we have doorways. After the funeral, these entrances were sealed with plaster to deter robbers. Here we can see rock-cut walls. These walls were bare rock, chiseled to smooth finish. And here are some items in the tomb. 4 full-size chariots, gold-covered couches with animal heads, bales of cloth, these rich fabrics that would provide clothes for the dead king in the afterlife. Here we have annex, and this room was filled with containers of luxurious foods and expensive wines and oils. In this chamber, we can see model boats, and these models were believed to grow to full size in the afterlife. Then here we have companion mummies. Two smaller mummies were found here, thought to be children of the king who died when they were young. This room contained the king's most valuable treasures. And this is a shrine for organs. The jars containing the king's organs were enclosed in a wooden shrine covered in gold. As part of the process of mummification, the internal organs were removed from the dead body, and they were kept in containers called canopic jars and housed in this shrine. Here we can see Anubis statue, and this jackal that represents Anubis, god of embalming, would guide the king in the afterlife. In this part of the tomb is mummy shrine. The sarcophagus were encased in 4 shrines of gold painted wood, and inner sarcophagus was of solid gold. That was all for today's session. Thank you for your attention. Good night and sleep well.